Hey everybody, this is Dr. Guy White of the dissertationmentor.com, and I am sitting outside my favorite coffee shop, hustling for time. And if you are anything like me when it comes to dissertation related work, time is of the essence. So this is a short video that I want to honor your time with. Really, how do I know when I'm done with my literature review? This is the number one question related to literature review that I get from candidates that have been writing it for some time, and perhaps you're curious. I mean, you're tired, you've been writing this for a long time. So in this video, we're going to just briefly talk about what are the 5 signposts of knowing when your literature review is done. And the nice thing is, if you have not finished your literature review yet, or if you're nowhere even near it, knowing these 5 signposts will allow you to quickly get done in a meaningful way and not get into that horrid situation where you find yourself in where you think you're done and then your chair tells you you're not. So chances are, if you're watching this video, you have this feeling that if you just had the right steps and guidance, you'd be able to finish this literature review quite quickly. And like most candidates experience, they don't feel like they have that guidance ahead of time. So this video is about giving you that guidance. And the literature review is not a never-ending process like some people suggest. In fact, there are specific ways of knowing that you're done. So my hope is that if you're here, you've seen my previous video. And if you have not seen my previous video, I recommend that is my previous video called How to Write a Literature Review, a dissertation literature review. Which you can get directly from the dissertationmentor.com. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you do that because this is building off of that video, which is, a more lengthy video. That's an hour-long video. So this is the short follow-up version to that. These are, of course, my kids, the people that I want to spend the most time with in my life. And, what takes you away from what's being taken away from your life because of the time you're spending on this literature review. And so my hope is that by going through this video, you'll have some more time on your hands, hopefully in the near future. So I'm I'm just showing this slide one more time just to emphasize that my experience is I've worked with many candidates on this process, which is why I can sit here in my vehicle outside of a local coffee shop and talk to you about this, because this is what I do. This is something I really enjoy, and my hope is that you'll benefit from this. Now, hopefully this slide doesn't look strange to you. This is, of course, a synthesis matrix, and this is where this all starts. And this is what we discussed in our last video, is how do you create a synthesis matrix and apply it in writing your dissertation literature review. So if you have not created your dissertation cave, entered the cave, been there for many weeks and months, looking through books and studies and all sources of all different kinds, and created something insane like a massive synthesis matrix, then you really should stop this video, go back, sign up for the dissertationmentor.com, or just go onto YouTube and find my other videos and look for that hour-long video about how to write a literature review. Start there instead of starting with this video. So with that, let's jump straight in, shall we? So how do you know when you're done? And this is really based off two very simple ideas. Number one is you want to get done. You want to be done with this process, and I want to give you the way to do that. But really, the biggest concern that I have whenever a candidate hands over unfinished work to me is that when they hand over unfinished work, what that means is they're taking a huge risk. They're telling me that, Dr. Guy, here is my literature review, and if they're not done, I might have to make a suggestion that is going to cause a massive revision to their work. Versus if they had handed me a more complete draft, I really wouldn't have seen an opening or a chance for a massive revision, so I wouldn't have requested it. So it's almost like choosing your own destiny. Would you rather choose your dissertation destiny, or would you rather have your chair or your committee members make that decision for you? I have a feeling you want to make that decision. So whenever we're handing things over to our chair, typically we want to always make that a final draft, as much as a final draft as possible. Not really these check-in drafts, these check-in emails, which are good to a certain extent, but often are just simply time wasters. Spend less time checking in with your chair and more time finishing and creating final draft quality work. And so that's a place to start with. So let's get into the signposts, your 5 signposts. How do I know when my dissertation literature review is done? Number one is that the first lines of your literature review should be able to tell a story. If you were to go out and bold or highlight every single line in your literature, every single first line of every paragraph in your literature review, and then you copied and pasted just the first lines of your dissertation literature review into a new document, you should be able to sit there, stare at another person in their eyes, and tell them the story of your literature review just using those first sentences. Which means that your literature review should be able to speak for itself just using those first sentences. A lot of candidates are very surprised by this. And the reason this is so important is that your dissertation literature review needs to tell a logical story. And the way that it tells that logical story is using the first lines of your literature review. So start there and just read those first lines. See what story, if any, your literature review is telling. The second success signpost is that paragraphs should always open with at least 3 synthesized authors. A lot of candidates get really shocked by that. They're like, really? Every first sentence of each paragraph should have at least 3 authors? Absolutely. That tells us that you've synthesized, that is, you've gathered together the multiple voices of many authors at a very high level. So every single first sentence should look something like the example you're seeing on your screen. You should see at least 3 authors, if not 4, 5, 6 authors, pulled into a single statement at the beginning of each paragraph that makes a logical point. And if you don't, this means that you probably haven't gathered enough expert voices into your discussion yet about your topic, and so you need to go back, build more on your synthesis matrix, create more of the logical flow, and add more voices, right? The whole point of the literature review is to discuss all available literature about the various variables and theory areas discussed in your study. So a lot of candidates get stuck on, they found 1 or 2 authors that spoke about something, so they think they're done. You need to synthesize many, and all means really all available, many, 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 many. So go back and check out those first sentences again and make sure they have at least 3 authors there. That's a great way of knowing whether or not we've synthesized at a high level. Signpost number 3 is that the citations themselves should be conversations between authors. That is, what do the authors, the researchers together say? One of the most common mistakes you see when a novice writes a literature review is that you'll see a majority of the citations being from single individual authors. Stuff like Jones, 1935, said that, XYZ. And that's okay for some of the citations in your literature review, but really that misses a point. What you want to do is you want to tell us what many authors said about the individual points in your literature review. So that way you're showing the conversation as a whole developing. Look at the percentage of multiple authors that are represented within your study. Well, you should clearly see, and this is not a hard and fast number. This is more of an approximation. Is 70% of your citations should be from multiple authors, whereas about 30% of them could be from single authors. So really, the way to look at it is for every 3 times or so that you do multiple authors, you can do 1 single author citation. Really what you want to do is tell us what authors are saying together as opposed to what they're saying individually. One of the biggest mistakes I see in this success signpost is that candidates talk about what studies did. They surveyed X number of participants, they did this type of research method and such. That's an okay part of the conversation, but that's really not the most important part. The most important part is what did each study contribute to the larger building body of knowledge? And that's what you're trying to synthesize, is tell us what did the researchers find together during this time period. Do you see how synthesis works? It's about the conversation together, not just what an individual study did. Success signpost number 4, each section should end with a summary statement. So you should see something like at the end of each heading, like for example, you might have a heading called, the postmodern era, and you'll end it by saying, so Therefore, researchers in the postmodern period discovered that ABC, whatever they discovered. And then you cite all of them together. You're summarizing what all of them said together. So again, at the end of each section, you should see this sort of thing happening. Because just like every paragraph should have a point, a logical point, each section should have a logical point too. So look at just the sections themselves. What do each section contribute? How do they contribute to the larger conversation happening in your literature review? What are the sections saying together? And that really brings us to our last point, which is that the lit review needs to have a therefore at the end. Now, when my chair, way back when, told me this, my head sort of spun because I was like, oh, I finally get it. The whole purpose of your literature review is to, in a way, justify that your purpose statement makes sense, that your study makes sense. So at the end of your literature review, one of the last lines should sound something like, so, therefore, a study, and then you fill in your purpose statement, a study that examines the leadership characteristics of activities directors in high schools in Southern California is well supported by the literature. And then you could even cite a couple authors there. The point is, in the end, to show that your literature review as a whole led to a final point. And that's what it's doing. Your literature review as a whole is saying a series of logical statements, the first sentences of each paragraph, and the last sentences of each section, leading up to this final sentence at the end of your literature review. So, what's the final point of your literature review? What does it say? Now, what I want you to do is just remember that the whole point of this is to take it and apply it. So go and apply these 5 signposts. Look at this video, rewind, see how each of your signposts applies. Share this video with someone else and have them be in a conversation with you. I mean, if your chair hasn't seen this video, they need to see this video to make sure they're on the same page with you about what success looks like. Maybe they don't know what a great literature review looks like. If you have questions, leave a comment at the bottom. I'd love to respond. And share this with a friend. Get someone else involved in your literature review conversation so that way you're not working alone. Anyways, I'm late for an appointment, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers. Check out thedissertationmentor.com if you have not already.